On this video, I'm going to try to share some information on changing the chain on a motorcycle. It's something I have to do on a regular basis on my small, humble motorcycle collection. I've learned a couple of things the hard way, do's and don'ts. I'm going to try to share them. And some of the things that I've learned that'll make your chain last a lot longer. And most of the information is basic 101. I don't think anything on this video is out of the range of an average mechanic. And maybe if you haven't changed the chain on your own bike, after watching this video, you should be able to do it without any problem at all. You do need a few simple tools, and you do need a little bit of just mechanical common sense. But I think it's a job really anybody in a shop can do. So obviously the first consideration is, when should I change the chain? Well, for me, the factories usually recommend around 15,000 is the average. If you really take care of a chain and lube it and clean it, you might probably around 20, and maybe a lot less if you just let the chain go and ride in sandy, dirty areas. Well, in this case, one of the things I do that a lot of people don't do is I inspect the links. I get down on my knees and look for a loose link. And as soon as you see a loose link, or you see another tip-off that the chain is time for replacement, when you go to adjust it and at one point in the chain it's real tight and the other part it's sloppy loose, it means it's wearing unevenly. A lot of times that can be from parking a bike over the winter and not driving it. Just because the bottom rung of the chain is laying in a different direction than the top. Moisture gets in it, the grease doesn't move around. So it's a good idea, number one, if you put the bike away for the winter, take some oil or grease or WD-40 and a rag and get it saturated with oil. That'll just extend the life of the chain, that you won't be putting a new chain on prematurely. And that's a good tip. That's one tip I've used over the time of owning all these old motorcycles. And the next thing, when you go to buy a chain, you find out there's a lot of different brands. Some are probably in the $50 range. Some are in more expensive. And of course, some of the real high-end ones go as much as $350. But you want to get a good quality O-ring chain, O-ring. Now, you'll probably want to invest in a chain tool that does the braking and the squashing of the rivets. It's a good investment to have. A good chain breaker, it's expensive. Some are around $75 to $100, but the good ones last a lifetime. The cheap ones usually break or they seize the threads on the bolt because they're not hardened. It's a really good idea to save the directions. This is a ProMotion tool, which is one of the good ones. And it's a good idea to save the directions and keep them with all your chain things in one spare place. Because this is something, when you go to change a chain a year later, you may forget how to do it, or one of the sequences. The directions on these are usually really good. Now, one thing I do, and I know a lot of my friends don't really do this, is whenever I have that side cover of the engine off where the countershaft sprocket is, I like to clean it with a brush, some diesel fuel. I want to get a couple of towels underneath it, a turkey pan, anything, because inside of that cover, what happens, the countershaft sprocket wears 3 times as fast as the rear sprocket. So what happens, the grit and the dirt that get caught up in there, if you choose not to clean it, it's like putting grinding compound up inside. So I'm usually very fussy here. Ordinary diesel fuel and an old paintbrush and about 5 minutes of work, some compressed air to blow out all the residue. Once I have that clean, now on this bike, it was very easy. There's just a few screws hold that side piece on. You get right at the countershaft sprocket. And I want to do this before I put the new chain on, because I want that to be clean. I don't want to have a bunch of grinding compound in by the countershaft sprocket. And all of these things about checking the chain and cleaning the chain and lubing the chain means I'll get more mileage out of it before I have to replace the chain again. And that you can bet your life on something. When you don't replace the chain, you think, wow, look inside the counter where it's all gritty and everything. What happens? An old chain that's worn beyond spec, it starts wearing out the sprockets, and then the next time you change the chain, you got to replace the sprockets and the chain. And if you don't do that, the worn out sprockets chew up your new chain. So damned if you do and damned if you don't. Keep it clean. And I don't know about other people, but I always feel once you have certain parts of a bike apart, it's a shame not to clean them. In this case, using a rag, compressed air. Here, you just wrap it around a paint stick. You can get in all the little nooks and cranny and everything. But having that stuff out of it and having the inside of the cover clean, it's going to prolong the life of the chain. And the chains are getting expensive, as every time I buy one, it's $10 more than the time before. And if you buy the cheap, no O-ring chain, now I got some parts cleaner to spray in there, and it doesn't matter what you put in it. Diesel fuel seems to work pretty good too. Compressed air is another good way. But when that's all clean, I just feel like it's worth. This is the part of the job that a lot of people skip. They just cut the chain and then thread the new one through the back, snap on a link, and they think it's done. And then the chain wears out prematurely, and you wonder, what, maybe I should have spent that 20 minutes or a half hour cleaning everything up. And also, in my case, it's more reliable. I don't want to have a chain issue far from home, that's for sure. So once everything is as clean as I can get it, then it's time to take out the chain tool, take out the directions. There's several little components that go into using the chain tool. This again is the ProMotion one, and it is a good one. All the parts are very hard. You can use it over and over again. I have had cheap chain breakers in the $20, $30 range that they broke one chain, and then the second time you couldn't use it. But anyway, this is a ProMotion one, is a good one. Now, if you read the directions, there's a lot of ways to do this. You can break the chain by just cutting it. A Dremel tool, a parting wheel, I can have the chain off the bike in less than a minute. This, I think, is a neater way. It doesn't throw sparks all over your shop or require that you wear safety glasses or anything. But that pin is going to push out the pin that's going to allow you to break the chain. What makes it easier, if you take one of the pins, whichever one you're going to use the chain breaker on, and grind it flat with a Dremel tool, it just makes doing this a lot easier. But learning how to use this tool, and it is not real complicated, but there's several different functions. This tool breaks the chain, number one. It seats the plate evenly, number two. And the third thing, that it makes the mushroom end so that the master link, what would be the master link in the old days, and would have a clip. You don't have that clip. On modern bikes, almost all the modern bikes I know, have the little thing that mushrooms, the links are even made. In fact, some of the ones I've gotten from Vlad, I don't remember what brand they were. I get all my chains from Vlad. What happens is they give you the link with the pin, and they give you the link that you need this tool to make a mushroom end. And doing that mushroom end without making that one link way too tight, it's a real important thing when you do this. And it's important to always read and save the directions. Now I'm using a Dremel tool and a parting wheel to flatten, or a little grindstone, make a flat spot on the link. That just makes pushing the pin out so much easier. Saves wear and tear on your arm and on the tool. Using the tool, you put that in place, and the pin, you read the directions, the pin tells you exactly how to push that pin out. You can then unthread the old chain and clean that back piece off by the sprocket. I want that whole area nice and clean. I also, at this point, loosened up the chain adjusters so I can get the new chain on with the adjusters as far forward as possible. In other words, I want the wheel to be as far forward as I can when I put the new chain on. I don't want the wheel to be in the back, or somewhere down the road I'm going to be removing a link. So having the adjusters loose, getting this part clean, that's all part of the sequence of the job. I thread the new chain on. That's kind of self-explanatory. And there's a really good tip: use zip ties. See how I have zip ties to hold the two pieces together, and I measure the chain. And it's a real important thing to make sure you don't cut the chain incorrectly. Believe me, the first time you do that, you're in trouble. So measuring that out, now I can measure exactly where I want to cut it. And I want to do the same thing as push the pin out that I don't want to use. A better way to do this that I haven't used in the past is to get the exact chain at the exact length, and you don't have to do this step. You don't have to cut it. I am always of the opinion, and this is the tip I like to leave on every video, make sure you cut a full length, not a half length. And once you've established that and you have the new master link, this is the part of the tool that presses the plate in place. And you read the directions, it tells you exactly which pieces go on there. Kind of self-explanatory. But having all the leverage that tool allows you to have, it pushes the plate on exactly right. And if you don't use this, if you push it too hard and make that too tight, you squeeze the O-ring unnecessarily. So it's a good idea to do this exactly the way the directions tell you. And what'll happen if you leave the plate too loose, you won't get enough of a mushroom effect on the pin. So this is kind of a critical step. Common sense would tell you you could take a micrometer or make yourself a little gauge so that you could make that link like the one that's already assembled from the factory. And I have that tool and it works perfectly, but it's still an extra tool you have to buy. You really can do that step without that tool. So when I've done this, now I can spin the wheel. I've had the chain adjuster as the axle adjusters as far forward as I can go. I'm making sure the new chain, of course, comes from the factory with factory grease. I want to make sure it's clean. I don't have the link that I just put in squeezed too tight or too loose, and that's something you have to be careful of. And that the mushroom is big enough that that pin can't slide out while you're riding the bike. So it's a little bit tricky, but certainly nothing out of the realm of an average person. And when you think having this done at a dealership would be a few bucks, that's for sure. You can do it yourself in about an hour, and at the end of it, you'll still own the tool. And the next time you got to do a chain, or you'll own it to your friend. And once the chain's adjusted, now a new chain tends to wear a lot better on brand new sprockets, like when you buy a brand new bike. And Turbo Steve had that theory that my MT-09 looked like it was never going to need a chain adjustment, but it's all brand new stuff, and the Yamaha chains that come from the factory seem to be pretty good quality. But then as things wear, you need to adjust them more, and you need to check it more, maintain it more. But nothing is nicer than having a brand new chain. It just runs so nice and smooth. So with the chain adjusted, there's not much left to do. Relatively straightforward job. I hope the information on the video is useful. No matter what bike you're changing the chain on, it's going to be very similar, maybe a little bit different. But I do think it's important. I log in the mileage and all of the maintenance I do on a bike. I like to keep the chain clean. I do spend a lot of time cleaning things because I want it to be like new as long as possible. And I've managed to get a lot of mileage out of the chains that I have. And I'm sure that if you don't maintain them, it's not in your favor. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so again, I hope you did enjoy the video. And thanks so much for watching.